Hi everyone, welcome to another On This Day in Canadian Military History live stream. Today is going to be a Ask Me Anything about the raid on 1942 raid, primarily of Canadians of the 2nd Division attacking the French coastal town of Dieppe. Highly controversial, is putting it mildly. Been discussed ever since. It happened 80 years ago yesterday. All kinds of controversy around it related to why it happened, how it happened, who did what during when and why, and aftermath, and discussions about it, historical actors, discussion and historical discourse. Anything and everything that's pretty much connected to Dieppe is controversial, particularly in Canada. I don't think I'm going too wide on the mark on that one. There was lots of questions yesterday across social media, lots of misunderstandings on all kinds of things, particularly in Canada. It was across national media, all that stuff. World War II TV yesterday had Alex and Mariev from the Juno Beach Center. They had an exhibit. They still do, sorry, is running. It's been running since March, about Dieppe and the understandings behind it and what it means to Canada and what it means to the war all over. There's lots of questions. They were busy, as you can imagine, being the Canadian voice in Europe about the Second World War. So they couldn't, really take questions. They really wanted to get through, and Woody was great at kind of facilitating and all of that moving forward with everything with that and keeping it on task. So there was a lot of questions that went unanswered. Rightfully so. So I kind of was trying to answer them as best I could within the chat at the time. There's just a lot, and it's a lot of nuance and a lot of explanations necessary. There's a lot behind it, and all kinds of stuff. And it's not even just about the raid itself. Like, these things are not easy to explain very quickly. So there's lots of time today, all kinds of questions. Fire away at any time. I will move through about anything and anything. I will do my best to answer them as best as possible. If you have a controversial question, please ask. I will answer. Again, this is all just my own opinion, though, and based on my own research and understanding of everything that went into it, everything I've done. I'm no David O'Keefe here. I haven't studied this thing for decades, but I've been looking at it in all different kinds of contexts, which kind of think can be beneficial as well. I've looked at it in terms of what defeat means in Canada, how defeat is understood in wartime, how the official history wrote on this stuff, all that. So I think I think I have a position to comment on quite a few things. And also kind of my studying of Normandy, I think, is part and parcel of this, which is interesting in terms of how this connects to Normandy. So it's inevitable that these things get connected. And that's the point they were making yesterday on World War II TV, which I'll link later down below if you haven't seen it. I'll link that for later. So we'll get firing already. Looks like we've got some questions moving already. So that is great. Just want to make sure I've covered everything. I'm going to keep up as best as possible if I'm silent for a second. That's why I'm just on my own here trying to keep up. Okay, so, thank you so much, Sheldrake. I really appreciate that, the support as a YouTube team member. I really, really appreciate that. I see those who help me through Patreon or through the YouTube membership program as part of the team. I've been saying this over and over again. You guys are part of the team, and I can't do it without you. So please do join if you can. There's a little join button right now, or you can do it later. There's also a link down below, also for Patreon. So check that out. A little bit of contribution every bit a month makes a big difference. Lets me buy a new kit. Got my new camera going today. Had it going yesterday with Nathan. So it allows me to do things like that. And the more support I have, the more tech I can upgrade, and the streams can be better. The things can be better. I can go more places, do more things. So thank you so much. Okay, so first one. Okay, so lessons learned from the Allies and from the Germans. Okay, so of course I am a Canadian historian. I'm just going to preface these things, as I will be doing probably a lot. I'm a Canadian-focused historian. I don't know the German side as well. I don't speak German. I haven't really worked with German sources other than kind of what's in the archive here in Canada. I mean, I've seen a few, not many, a little bit related to Dieppe, but not too much. So that said, again, I will preface this at the beginning and probably say it throughout. This is just my understanding from my research. So one of the things about the lessons learned, to me, in my opinion, it's overblown. It was not the reason for the raid. We'll get to the reasons probably later. Not the reason for the raid. They weren't just going to throw a division at a town to learn some lessons. It's unnecessary. It's just not what is needed to be done. So that is not a driver of the raid. In my opinion, there was very few lessons learned, few lessons to be learned. Right. The big one that's also kind of noted now, particularly lately, in terms of with the whole David O'Keefe pinch thing and kind of evaluating the historiography of Dieppe, is the protection of engineers on the beaches. The engineers had difficulty clearing obstacles because Dieppe was full of them at all points of the beach. Again, that's another myth that maybe we can get to, is about the tanks and the obstacles. The engineers just couldn't get forward to blow the obstacles. Even on the esplanade there, the promenade, couldn't get that far forward, let alone into the town itself. They had very difficulty because of high casualties. So one of the things that kind of is said to come from this is the use of AVREs, so armored vehicle rail engineers. So also used by the Canadians at Normandy. Yes, that's used, that's done. But what something as I've learned recently from all kinds of different sources is it's not as much as you think it would be at Normandy. I've seen video of it, of them practicing with these things, engineering units. Yeah, there are the tanks and everything, they're there. I'm not denying that. But it's not as you think. They're not using them like APCs as you would think they are. I've seen the video. They're coming off the landing craft with these tanks. There's guys in the open. Like, they're not, it's the same, right? Yes, there are protection. There are these things like the petard on the big one, right? That blows obstacles if necessary, but it's not necessarily the same thing. There's all kinds of accounts of engineers being on the landing craft with the infantry moving forward. So even with that said, there is lessons learned, but these things are also done independently. So, and it's not to the extent you would think it was. There's just engineering casualties in Normandy too on the beaches. It's just their lessons have been learned, but I think elsewhere and from training in England. So that's a big one. I'm not disputing that one per se. It's just I don't think it's as big of a deal as it's made out to be. It's not. It's another one, and maybe we can get to this later. It's kind of a justification kind of thing, and that's, to me, that's just nonsense. Let's say let's throw a whole division plus at an objective to learn a few lessons. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Also, a few lessons learned, things like gunfire, which got asked about by the History Explorer. We'll get to there in a second. But things like that, I mean, to me, those, I'm not trying to be presentist or whatever the buzzword of anger is lately. Just some of these things you can learn very easily during staff exercises. You don't need to launch a raid to learn these things. Gunfire on positions, bombing. They knew these things. Heavy artillery support, naval support, gunfire support. They knew these things. There was discussions before the attack on what to do, and they just didn't do them for all kinds of reasons that are still, I argue, kind of shrouded in a little bit of mystery. So to say that it's lessons learned, that doesn't make any sense. Of course, battleships are big enough to hit these targets. We needed them. That's why they brought them at Normandy. Dieppe, there's all reasons why they didn't, and we'll get there in a second. But there's not that much going on here, right? Other landings have bigger impacts on what goes on. Torch is one of the first ones, right? The Allied landings in North Africa, November 1942, and then through to Italy, right? The Mediterranean, as it's sort of affectionately called a lot of the times, has so many more lessons to be learned about what it takes for these large-scale operations. The whole thing about air cover as well is not really too much of a lesson learned, right? The RAF wanted to draw the Luftwaffe into a clash in the skies, try to, attrition them out. Didn't quite work that way. I mean, the Air Force did the best they could under the circumstances. I'm not blaming them, but per se, but it just, with what was allocated, just didn't work. So this whole idea of a surprise raid, maybe that's a lesson. I don't know. It doesn't really match up with the documents. There's talking of literally bombarding the town into nothing at certain points in the planning. They're just going to flatten Dieppe. So to say that's a lesson learned is just, it's not accurate in my opinion. It's just missing. We are flying already. This one's a bit bigger one because it's one that always comes up. From the Germans, I don't know too much. I know there's defenses added to Dieppe and other places. There's things learned about the Churchill tank, right? It's the first use in combat. And again, there's all kinds of myths surrounding just those alone. So they get to learn about those, right? And all of that. I mean, getting your enemy's weapons is always a good thing in terms of learning. But again, like I said, I'm not a German historian. I don't know that as much. But things about defense, I mean, there's all kinds of things learned in terms of making those ports more defensible. I mean, they're already were pretty defensible, but there's all kinds of pictures and accounts and everything. Especially, when 1st Canadian Army comes in play on the long left flank, right, of the Swan, as they call it, up the coast. Sorry, we're backwards here. Going up the coast in 44. And you can see these defenses and everything. And these ports are very well defended from the ocean. So, from the channel, sorry. So, it's I think that's lessons learned is all that, right? Defend the ports best as possible, but then again, the Allies just learned to flank them. But again, is that learned from Dieppe? I don't think so necessarily. They tried it again at Anzio, right? And that went horribly. They tried the direct assault to get in behind, and it didn't work. They attacked a port, it didn't work. The breakouts in Italy needed to free Anzio, right? The thing that was supposed to be the breakout had to be broken out. So, I mean, I think that's a bigger lesson, especially on a larger scale, right? This is a one-day raid, so it's not quite the same. So sorry, hopefully that answers that about lessons learned, but maybe we can get into more specifics if there's more questions. Yeah, this is interesting as well. I mean, I'm not surprised. The only French language covered was based out of Windsor. I mean, that's not surprising with the Scottish, and there is a sizable French-speaking population still in Windsor. And I assume Mary-Eve was on Radio Canada. I would assume so. I didn't listen. I didn't really listen to any of the coverage yesterday, just because I wanted to keep my own thoughts and everything. Plus, I was busy, as you guys saw. Okay, so yeah, sort of. Yes, organic, kind of, not really. Rocket launching attacks from aircraft, destroyers, but not much. I mean, it's hardly anything in comparison. Like I talked about, there was discussion of much heavier stuff, which was not used. The biggest ship is a destroyer, and these are undergun destroyers as well as comparison to later. They're just 4-inch guns. It's nothing. It's going to do nothing. Just bounce off, and particularly in those cave positions and on top, just untouchable. So it wasn't very, very much. Nothing like firing from the shore, nothing like that. Tank support is all controversial in and of itself, but very little. I mean, the details of planning, there is none really, other than the aircraft attacking in behind with some heavier bombers, which does next to nothing. No artillery. And again, the naval guns are minimal at best. Because there's just not enough allocated to this kind of raid. So unfortunate. I wish there was more, but there's really not much to talk about because there wasn't much going on. There was contact with the commander, right, Ham Roberts, but it didn't work a lot of the time, so it was ineffective anyway. And there was just all kinds of misunderstandings, which we'll probably get into. So yeah, so hardly any. Sorry, History Explorer, but there's just not much going on here. Hey Scott, thanks for joining us. Yes, a lot of familiar faces, Andreas. Yeah. And Sheldrake is correct. One of the things they learned, is tons of concrete every port on the coast, which ended up being a waste. Maybe that is one of the lessons again. I don't know. There's no support, connecting that direct to Dieppe for the Allies, right? Don't hit a port. Of course, don't hit a port. They learned that in Italy. Again, Anzio happens, and they obviously didn't learn from Dieppe on that one. But yeah, it ends up wasting German resources, which are thinning, right? As the Atlantic Wall, yesterday on World War II TV, I believe I called it a chain link fence. It's not a wall. It's not continuous. It's not a solid barrier. So to call it a wall is disingenuous. So maybe that's something that we can take from this is the Atlantic Wall is not a wall. It drains resources and it does next to nothing, right? These ports are attacked from the rear, or they just hold up to the end of the war and they let them starve. Maybe that's your lesson. I don't know, but it seems to me that that's done later and has nothing to do with Dieppe. Thanks, Scott, for joining us. And if you got to run, that's great. Heading to Boston. Nice. What you doing in Boston, if you can tell us? Probably business, I would imagine. And have a safe flight. Hey, Darren, thanks for showing up. Yeah, and just going back to exactly this. So they're all Royal Engineers, so they're not Canadians. As you know, the Canadians are literally just thrown in with the infantry. So there you go. And because I was trying to figure this out for a couple of things, I was trying to figure out I was trying to figure out when I was still doing some more historic footage and stuff and trying to research that before YouTube maybe take it down. I was trying to figure out, who was in what landing craft and what's going on and things like that. And I was surprised by the number of engineers that are in an individual landing craft, unprotected in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they had all kinds of roles. Some are coming much later, but there's some in the first waves, and they are not protected at all. So even to say that that's a lesson learned, even from the Canadians, is not correct. Yeah, not really. But again, this is done differently in terms of the locations chosen at D-Day. But yeah, some of these are still not learned. I mean, some, like Point de Hawk, obviously, is a scaling of a large body that, as it turns out, didn't necessarily need to happen. Which is not, I'm not an expert on that, but but that's still there. I mean, it's unavoidable in some places. But I think with Normandy, a lot of choices that had to be made and had to be done based on the overall objectives. But it's definitely something that doesn't just stop, right? The seawalls are there, still are. They're an obstacle. They have to be overcome. And yes, heights vary. Yeah, and again, going back to the fire support, yeah, they didn't want to destroy the town. Initially, they were going to. I've seen the planning documents, and they're in Canada in our National Archive. They were going to flatten it, full out, just flatten the thing to stop reinforcements from coming in. But then again, there's concerns about what you're going to hit, who you're going to hit, and depending on, again, maybe we can get into the pinch stuff later about that as well, right? If you're trying to pinch documents or small machines like an Enigma, flattening a town is going to make that more difficult. But yeah, there's this conscious lack of fire support, which turns this into even more of a slaughter in so many ways. But yeah, they were gonna, but they decided not to. And that's the way it is, right? So good question, Scott. 1943, Quentin Reynolds' book. Yeah. I don't know, like specifically, like connecting like footnotes and things like that. I don't know. I've heard of this book. I've used this book. I mean, it was a long time ago. I wrote on Dieppe in undergrad, which is another lifetime ago for me. I think that would have been 2008. I wrote on this. So it was a long time ago, but I used that book because I was trying to understand kind of not necessarily primary documents, because it's hard to do as an undergrad in Canada, but to understand like books written at the time or those who were there or had a connection to it, like through journalists and things like that. So I looked at that one about the whole dress rehearsal and why does Dieppe happen? So I did look at that. So I think it does have an impact. It is discussed. Dieppe has a major impact across Canada. So these things have an impact. I mean, I've got some of the older books here, like Terence Robertson's book. I mean, I'm sure he references it. If there's even proper references in here, I don't know. I haven't looked in a long time. But I mean, probably not. Yeah, he does use it. So that's not unsurprising. That's kind of why I have a whole stack of books right next to me, because I wanted to, if I needed to, use an example or some show and tell. But he definitely references Reynolds, but this is from the 60s. So we're in a different time period with the historiography there. But yeah, as far as I know, it has an impact. I don't know entirely in terms at the time of its publication, but it has an impact and it's used in sources. So the answer is yes. Okay, here we go. So Andreas is asking the big questions already. He goes right at the pith of this issue, doesn't he? Good on you. Good on you, Andreas. So I'm sorry if I keep saying your name wrong. I have a friend who we think we keep mispronouncing it, but we just keep forgetting, which is correct. Sorry, I'll leave that up. So sacrifice, yes, some do, some didn't, some in between. Some who were there, yes, felt they were just used as sacrificial lambs later on. Some did not. Just again, with any veterans group, you're going to have a multitude of opinions, and no one's ever going to have the same one. And some people change their opinions, right? They are people, and people change their minds. Some did, some did not. Some who have studied the raids since, yes, I think completely sacrificed them just because. That's not true. That's another donkeys led by lions myth that has spilled over into the Second World War. It's not true. The Canadians wanted to be involved. They wanted to be there. Couillard wanted them involved. The troops wanted to be involved. I mean, there's some possibly apocryphal stories of when Rudder is canceled, right? The first iteration of the attack on Dieppe raid whichever. I'm going to use those interchangeably today. They cried. They were pissed off. They were mad. They wanted to go. They wanted to fight. They hadn't fought. Second Div had not fought at all. None of them had, right? The only ones that had fought were the ones at Hong Kong when they were now all POWs or killed. That is just the nature of that. It's not a sacrifice if you're, it's a willing sacrifice, I guess, but it's not that. It was not that. They were going to throw, well, again, this is all shrouded in misunderstandings and concerns about the documents and the secrecy and all of that. Mountbatten wanted to use just his units that he had developed, or the Royal Marine Commandos and stuff like that. It's too much. So, and again, depending on what you believe in terms of the reasoning for the raid, it's not enough troops. Also, you need to throw more at them. They were going to use the British division. Canadians said, we'll do it. And it turns out it was the wrong decision, obviously, but that's hindsight. So be it. But some, yes. But again, this is shrouded in controversy and purposeful misunderstandings and misinformation and anger and all of that stuff that follows these kinds of things. It's one and the same. Same with Hong Kong. Same with some stuff in Normandy. Right? It just keeps going. Canadians fight under British leaders. There's always going to be someone crying, sacrificial lambs. It doesn't stop. Still goes on. Now it's just been replaced by the Americans, mostly. So that is something that continues on, but definitely is connected to Dieppe. Some just didn't understand why. Some just didn't care. Right? They're there to do a job. Doesn't matter. We do what we do. It just went poorly. So yeah, so it's not necessarily as clear and clean as we want it to be, but none of these questions are going to be. None of the answers are going to be, just because that's the nature of this stuff. Yeah, and Dave again, he was on fire yesterday, and again in. So it's the biggest raid, not the smallest invasion. That's something to keep in mind. Keep that in mind. It's not an invasion. Butcher and bolt, snap, pinch raid, call it whatever you want. It's not an invasion. Just keep that in mind. Yeah, so all the concrete defenses are put in place afterwards. That's a big one, big part of this. Yeah, so that's a big part of this, right? Is for the Germans and the resource wasting, right? That bunker that's used has a plaque in it is later. So yeah, that's something else to keep in mind. The Germans don't have concrete defenses at this point. They've just got a ton of barbed wire and some good natural positions. Used to amazing effect. You're welcome, Andreas. Keep firing away. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. The Black Watch didn't get some of the heavier weapons on shore, but it did nothing. Right. Blue Beach was a slaughter. Didn't matter. Yeah, get a platoon on, but they didn't deploy them, so it didn't matter. And Blue Beach is just a sad story. Yeah, and of course the gunners were landed, but again, they didn't get enough to do any good. They didn't get in far enough to get to the German guns they were supposed to capture. It didn't make a difference. Again, so many moving parts in this. Yeah, maybe that's something I wanted to touch on here. Is there's so many moving parts in this. So many. I mean, whatever the reasons why, it doesn't matter. There's still way too many moving parts. Still way too much for them to do. The op lists are just ridiculous. The orders are crazy. Way too much. We're contingent on other ones working. Like, you need A for C to work so that E can move forward. And then, we got to keep going. And then it's just interconnected and it's a mess. And it just relied on so many things and so many hands in the pie, too many cooks in the kitchen. Doesn't matter what the driver was. That doesn't matter here. It's just too much, way too much for inexperienced troops who had never seen combat. Few who had led in combat, hardly anyone. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. I could be wrong, of course. There's these World War I veterans sneak their way in all the time, particularly in the early parts of the war. But again, there's just this lack of combat on a larger scale. It's just too much. Too much. I mean, Normandy is so simplistic in comparison, right? Take your objective here, push forward. Take outside set of positions outside this town. This is like move here, go here, take this, move this, bring this guy over here. It's just too much. Way too much. Hey Norma, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean the Mulberry Harbors are an engineering marvel, right? There's pieces that still survive. Aramonge, if you've never seen them, they're impressive. I mean, Aramonge just kind of turned into this Normandy D-Day in Disneyland, which is just unfortunate, but it has a historical part to it. That said, yeah, they probably didn't imagine, something like that being done, right? And two of them, like that's just something only the Allies could do. And the pipeline, which I mean, as it turns out, is as important, but it's all these engineering ideas that are moving forward. Are those a direct result of Dieppe? No, God no. But again, it shows that the learning had taken place, but where is it from? It's unclear. A lot of people who have looked at this say it's not Dieppe. It's just not. So yeah, so that's a good point though. It's just, I mean, sorry, I'll come back to Sheldrake in a second here, but I mean, these moving giant concrete caissons that they sink when they get into position and break ships. And I mean, it's just, imagine that, right? Like it's hard, right? As the Germans, right? It's so unimaginable. And coming back to my point about the Atlantic Wall, yeah, Terry Kopp knows way more than I do. Knotted rope, which is a good way to put it, but a knotted rope is pretty easy to cut. So is a chain link fence, right? So I think we're on the same page there. Not to say I'm on the same level as Terry Kopp, not even close. Oh, cool, Scott, vacation and professional conference. Yeah, Terry has a way with words. Yeah, excellent writer. Excellent writer. Oh, thanks, Scott. Scott's my U.S. hookup now for videos. Yeah, he's always on the lookout for Canadian stuff, so I appreciate that. He got me the Avro car, which was awesome to see that, and then in the U.S. Air Force Museum, and the other plane, which I am now drawing a complete blank on. Sorry, I'm just Dieppe on the brain. I mean, yeah, Andreas, yeah. Did they learn that from Dieppe, though? No. Like, I mean, no, they attacked Anzio. I mean, this is just simple stuff. I'm not saying you don't are being stupid or anything like that or wrong. It's just lots of people believe that, right? And it's just, I used to too, right? It's like, well, of course, they learned not to attack a harbor. It went horribly. And then you look at Anzio and you go, well, wait a second here. What are they doing? It's not the same, obviously, but they didn't advance. They got stuck, right? It was a huge mistake. It became, what do they call it, a beached whale? Didn't work until the breakout came up behind the Germans and forced them to retreat. So did they learn that lesson? I don't know. I don't think so. Not all levels anyway. Not all the Allies. So yeah. Yeah, so, and again, coming back to the sorry, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the walls. Yeah, the equal height. They're not 100 feet, as Andreas mentions here. I think. Sorry, who said that? Rob said 100. I think he's just hyperboleing here. They're tall though. They're 10, 12 feet tall on the day. Same with Normandy. They're not as tall now because they don't need to be. Things have been moved around. So that kind of thing. But yeah, they're very difficult. Sorry, I'm just going through as I go through. I'm trying to catch up. You guys have got some really good questions. Okay, yeah. So Susan, what controversies? I'm just going to keep pushing through, and if I don't see any of them, or if one of them I want to talk about is missed, I'll just discuss it. Sound good? Just because there are so many. It's still going. Yes, there was male treatment, not in the same way as you saw in Normandy, though. There's not outright executions on the battlefield by 12th SS kind of thing. No, there's poor treatment of POWs, kind of death marches, shackling of POWs' hands, like that happened because we were said to do that because there was orders found to shackle POWs. So the Germans did it in retaliation. This turns into a fight through neutral countries because they're like, we'll stop shackling if you stop shackling, blah, blah, blah. And that just goes on forever until they eventually just stop doing it. Both sides. They just stop doing it. So that's the biggest one. I mean, but the ill treatment of the POWs much later in the war is part of this. Sorry, my camera's focusing. It's an autofocus. There, that seems okay. I'll try not to move so much, but I get animated when I talk. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, I'm not downplaying them because they treat the POWs terribly in a lot of situations. Some die of their wounds. But again, it's not the same as Normandy. This is not just outright executions like that you see, right? It's just, it doesn't happen that way for all kinds of reasons. But also, they wanted the Germans used Dieppe as a propaganda piece. So if there's any sort of executions, right, it falls apart real quick. Yeah, and coming back to the air support, yeah, precision target hitting is near impossible at 42. I mean, it doesn't get much better later on, to be honest, but it's just near impossible. Hitting Duggan guys on the top of a cliff with these bombers or hitting an airfield or whatever they're trying to do is near impossible. It's just dumb luck if you hit it. So. Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, it's 4 meters. Like, that's insane. Like, that's so tall. At Puy, I mean, it's still shocking today. But yeah, they've pushed the rocks up, so you can just access the beach easier. I mean, when I tried to climb one of those stone piles when I was there, because Mark Milner told me not to, and I had to, because he told me not to, because I was being stupid. And it was very difficult. So I can only imagine what it's like getting up that, and then the seawall while getting shot at, and barbed wire, and mortars coming down on you. It's just so difficult. Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one from Scott here, from Quentin Reynolds. It's not the only one, right? It's happening at the time. I've found footage in the U.S. archives as well about Dieppe, especially afterwards when they get there in 44, being like, this is the practice. We practice. We learned. That's a narrative driven during the war. There's the whole thing with Mountbatten pushing that forward, which we can maybe get into. Yeah, Sheldrake's right. Not the Canadian, somebody else. Yeah, and I mean, that comes with it too. Right? The planning was so bad. Like I said, the moving parts, it's just awful. And it turns into a slaughter for all kinds of reasons, obviously. Yeah, and this is a good point about, and I have Whitaker's book right here as well. I haven't been able to dig into it as much as I like. I've used it before, but is that yeah, rudder's canceled and they can take guys away because there's a bit of a gap, right? And these are constant. Guys are constantly in and out. Courses, training, weapons are taken away, leadership changes, all that stuff. So it hurts anything learned from the training courses, right? That those guys were on, that were connected directly to rudder. When those are canceled, you lose those lessons if they're not there on the day. Would that make much of a difference? I mean, that's a hypothetical that we'll never know. But Whitaker obviously mentions it. So obviously it had an impact on him in some way, shape, or form. Then at the time or after, regardless, still had an impact on him to think about it. So from Gary here, another supposed lesson learned from Dieppe that didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, I already talked about that at the beginning. If you have to go back at the end after we're finished. But yeah, they already knew this. I mean, it was learned when Cossack starts playing for sort of Normandy, right? Later on. It's not even considered because the scene is just, that's not going to work. So. Okay, so Ian Forbes, good question. I'm getting at the heart of it here. Was the overall objective to identify issues, etc., for the main assault in 44? No, I can answer that right now. No, never was, never, ever, never. And just went through so many iterations in planning, all different kinds of things. Never. That was never discussed. Never until after. Until, August 20th, 1942, nothing. There's nothing supporting this argument that was the case. Now, or was it to get intel such as the Enigma machine? There's the $64 million question, just throw back there, but making it even bigger. Now, this is, I might take a bit, so sorry if the comments build up. I mean, this was inevitable. Read David O'Keefe's work. I know David. He's a great guy. Love having him on the channel. Why I'm pausing and why I'm hesitant here. is not because he's not doing his proper work. It's not because he doesn't have archival documents. It's not because he hasn't written it well. He has. I mean, it's very well. I mean, I said controversial opinions on Twitter. Here's one of them. I think 7 Days to Hell is better than One Day in August. I like it better. That's me. I think it's a better book. Obviously, One Day in August is a massive impact on all kinds of things. But with that said, I am an academically trained historian, for those who don't know, who may be new. And if you are new, please subscribe. Thank you. If you haven't already. And like the video too, please. Very helpful. You can do so. So, that said, trained as an academic historian. Came across this issue myself. What's missing is a smoking gun. David Geef will say that it's not missing. That's up for debate, as is all historical things are, other than, horrible, mortal things like, killing civilians. I don't think that's up for debate. This is up for debate in terms of what the document says, what's implied, what's taken from it. My own dissertation hinged on the missing of a smoking gun, understanding what happens with Hong Kong. The document of what goes on down to the nitty-gritty is missing or never existed. I got slammed for it. I got told the argument falls apart because of it, and that's fair. I knew that was coming. I could say, here is what I found. Here is what this leads to. It's a leap at the end. You have to take a small leap of faith here. What the issue is I have with the way that this is argued by David O'Keefe is that they're saying that there is no leap. There is no need to leap even the littlest bit. Every document here supports that this is what this is. I was rereading the new one, right? The new edition about One Day in August. That's got the extra stuff on it. Everything's linked down below, so you can buy those as well in certain places. Mostly North America, sorry, Europe. And also help the channel, so please do. It's just missing. It's just missing that little tiny piece to say this is concrete. It's like this, right? It's not here, it's here. You still have to jump. You still have to make a leap. If you do this in a dissertation defense, you're going to get jumped on. And I did. I know because I did. That's what I'm trying to say is that's missing. Yes, there's a new piece about a meeting with all the different units that were supposedly on the side, or that were on the side where the Enigma snatch was going to happen. Sorry. Snatch, no. Pinch. Snatch can mean other things, and we'll just move past that. The pinch part, right on that side of the beach, the main beach at Dieppe, and all those units going forward to do that. The whole thing with the Locust and all of that. The ship that they were going to take in. That didn't end up happening at all. There's a meeting about that and a document he found connected to the Royal Marine Commandos about, not just doing raids for the sake of raiding. There has to be something more. There's got to be more, and he connects that to the Pinch, Enigma, all of that stuff in the North Atlantic. It's a huge, big picture that's all connected together. It is missing that one piece, and you can say it's because of secrecy, and that's fine, and that's enough for some people. For some people, it's not enough. I'm sorry. That's just the opinion I hold. I'm not disputing what he has to say in his research. I'm not. I'm saying it's missing a smoking gun in that instance. Right? If you can't find it, just say you can't find it, but say, look what I found. Right? It's not enough to be like, this is it because this is it. That's not how history works, right? And even if you say that, some people are just going to not believe you anyway and are just going to attack you based on all kinds of other things. It's just how this goes. It's almost like a schoolyard, but again, with a bunch of people with PhDs, it's not great, but that's how it goes. It's just, that's my opinion. No disrespect to David O'Keefe whatsoever in his research. I mean, it's fascinating that this thing is connected to this and the North Atlantic stuff, which again was, I think, overblown based on research other people have said, right? The U-boat war was never being lost by the Allies. So the whole need to get an Enigma, maybe we can get into that later. But, what's just the intel stuff? Yeah, it's part of this. It's there from the beginning. Is it the main driver? O'Keefe says yes. It's missing. It's just missing. And that's problematic. And it is what it is. I'm not just saying discount the whole thing because of that. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying sometimes you got to bring in a little more nuance than you'd like, a little more than, a little more oomph than you'd like, but that's the game, unfortunately. So I'm just going to try and keep up. I'm just going to try to do questions now, just because I'm probably really, really behind. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you. But Terry knows way more than I do, so take it what you will. Yeah, the good point, Scott. Sorry, come back to the harbor thing. They did. So that's what I'm saying. Is this is not necessarily that they're learning not to do that, right? They're hitting. Well, they hit outside of them and the other ports, right? In I think Algiers was landed outside. Mars Al Khalib, where the French fleet was, destroyed. That's a port. So yeah. Are there any movies on Dieppe? Good question. Not Hollywood movies, no. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. There's not really any Canadian movies to begin with. There's smaller ones, documentaries, and maybe some recreations in documentaries, but nothing like a Hollywood movie or anything. No, unfortunately, no. Oh, so there's a mini series. That's cool. Again, I was only 6, so I don't know these things. At the time in 1993, I was not old enough to understand what was going on. Miniseries about Victor Garber as Mountbatten. Okay, that's an interesting casting choice. And they made Career of the Villain of the Piece. Of course, they did, because everyone always makes Career of the Villain. Good point, Tris. $5 for every Enigma I've seen, I'd be rich. Shit, no kidding, eh? Okay, Gary, good question. So we'll get back into the questions here. I mean, the sidebar is awesome. Thanks, guys, for everything. And the comments, I just wanted to get caught up with some questions here, especially after that long piece. Montgomery is involved in the beginning, and then he's moved off, right? Because he's moved off to a different command. So he's there at the beginning as Home Forces commander, which included the Canadians. So he's involved. As far as I can tell, he is involved in the change to do the direct assault. Because there's concerns of all kinds of things. Again, depending on what you believe is going on with the drive here, right? Landing tanks on the main beach to support the pinch part is apparently vital, according to David O'Keefe, to understanding it. Also, issues of moving tanks on the flanks because of bridges, right? Blow a bridge, how do you get across when you're supposed to be doing this in 12 hours? It's not quick, right? Building those bridges is not easy. They got really good at it, but it's still not easy. They learned, but they hadn't learned yet. This isn't Normandy. This isn't after Italy, right? We're bridge after bridge after bridge. This is new. Not doing that yet. So there's that concern. So that was why they wanted to do a frontal attack. Again, depending on how you want to believing this and what author you believe, author, historian, whatever. So that's part of it. So yeah, Montgomery's part of this. He's a part of the whole thing. No. Is it all his fault? Not even close. Yeah, it's part of it. But he's involved in that as far as I can tell from the documents I saw and the understanding of it from other historians. That's what I got. Yeah, and I mean, I have that book right. Where is it? Here it is. And Brian Villa used to teach at my alma mater of Ottawa. Because you can see Mountbatten right there. Sorry, the reflection from my light. There he is. Saying he makes huge leaps in this one, right? Brian Villa makes massive leaps, saying Mountbatten just did this because of his own authority, which is just not true. Villa's is way more leaps than anyone I've ever seen. It's just full of leaps. I don't recommend it because it's just so bad. It's not well done. I'm sorry. I mean, I think he's passed on. Not to speak ill of the dead, but I'm a historian. It's what we do. It's not good. It's full of holes, and the holes don't make for good history. So yeah, normal. I mean, that's why I love doing these things. Disagreements, yeah, fire away. We can do this calmly, nicely. We don't have to get angry. We can just, I mean, go ahead. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to disprove O'Keefe. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to be a historian a little bit here with this one and being like, just wait, hang on a second. Like that's, hold on. That's it. That's it, right? That's all I'm trying to say is just take a step back, think about it. Like I said, I'm not a Dieppe expert. This is not my only thing. I've just looked at it in different ways, right? And it's not It's just missing to me. That's what I keep saying. This is all just my opinion. I am a trained historian. It's just my opinion because a lot of this stuff is right. Analysis is opinion based on research and evidence. That's just mine. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, the Bell advert that you've probably seen and got shown or talked about yesterday on World War II, they're completely separate. Yeah. Yeah, Bell ad's 2008-ish. I thought it was earlier for some reason. I don't know why. I thought it was earlier. Maybe just my sense of time is coming unglued, like some sort of out of a Kurt Vonnegut novel. Yeah, there were cell phones, but they're weren't good. No one was making a call from Dieppe back to me. At the beginning, he was involved, but then he again, Sheldrick talks about it right here. He's replaced. He replaces. So yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't save him from the blowback in a way. I only say that because I posted this a long time. I'll have to find it again. There was a documentary in the 1962, I want to say, early 60s, where they interview all these people. Mountbatten, Montgomery. They even get Ham Roberts, who had literally left Canada supposedly because of the treatment he received, which was not great, from the veterans and everybody. They tracked him down to the Channel Islands where he had moved, and he appeared very, very briefly, but he is on the tape. So is Kriar. They're all there, and they're all talking about this. So, and Monty is unapologetic about everything because he always was. He was never wrong. So he just keeps going on and on and on as he does in his usual style. Usually it's just everyone's reading his writings instead of watching him on film. That one is massive. I will try to find it. I think it should be easy to find. It may take me a minute, but I will post it again on Twitter, and I'll put it down below for those watching later on, if you do. But yeah, it's interesting. He doesn't escape it now, especially because we're talking about it right now, and he's involved in this, and he tries to distance himself, and it doesn't work. He tries to distance himself from all kinds of things, and it just doesn't work. Yeah, no, I know. Sorry, no, I know you're not angry. I know you're not. I mean, just in the general sense, people get angry about opinions they hold or things they get. I don't know. I was talking about this somewhere, and maybe it was on Twitter or something. I don't remember. I talk a lot of stuff all on a given day, but some people like take these things as part of their identity, and they get angry when someone tries to talk about it in nuance. Be like, maybe that's not the case, right? Like, what does it matter to your personality or your personal life if it's a pinch rate or not? What does that matter? I've known people who get angry at this stuff, and I'm just like, don't be angry. Your anger's not going to change anything. The second div still got slaughtered. Like, that's not going to change it. But you know what I mean? I was just using that as an example. I know you're not angry, Norma. We've talked about this before. Other people get angry, and then things happen, and people get upset. And I know you're not that person, which is why I appreciate you so much and all the support you give, because we can discuss and be like, yeah, we disagree, and that's cool. What else is going on? You know, that's what I like about you, Norma. Were the tanks amphibious? Not in the duplex drive sense of amphibious. They do have the snorkel kit. It's on my phone, so it won't look great. But I was at the War Museum on Thursday, and they have a Churchill with the snorkel set on it. So it's my hand being a snorkel on the back for the exhaust, as it would have been at Dieppe. So not in the sense of a DD swimming ashore amphibious, but with the kit to come ashore. Sorry, I'm just trying to jump ahead here for a second, Scott. I'm going to come back to this one in a second, okay? I just want to make sure. Yeah, wadding kits. Yeah, that's what wading is what it's called. I don't know, I call it snorkel. Maybe that comes from going like Jeeps and stuff. Like, that's what they call it now. Well, none of us should be, to be honest. Sorry, I want to jump ahead there for a second. Sorry. Dave cracks me up on here. Yeah, we can say Simmons 3 times and just piss her off. Yeah, well, and yeah, she says I've moderated my opinion, which, I mean, yeah. Well, I was going to come back to my other point you're making. It doesn't matter if you're an expert or not. If there's evidence and it's presented in a way and it's accessible, that's another issue I have sometimes. Not with O'Keefe, I'm saying here. But some people say, well, look at this evidence that I have in my personal collection. And I go, what are you talking about? That's not how this works. Everyone should be open to change their mind. I've met Jack Granatstein one time. Controversial figure, not going to deny it. But he was great to talk to, and I asked him about conscription, because that's another area that I'm really interested in, because he wrote about it a bunch. He changed his opinion, and he goes, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? You change your opinion with different study, new ideas, new people, new historiography. Isn't that the point? And I respect them for that. He's saying, I was wrong. He says it right. I was wrong. I changed my mind. This evidence says why. Boom. Isn't that what we're all supposed to do? That's Jack Granatstein, top of the field. Full academic credentials. He was in the military. He's got everything and everything you could want as an expert in this field. And he said it. So if he says it, why is it bad? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's no... Sorry, this is what I was talking about for Ham Roberts in that documentary. Yeah, Norman, I'll try to find it. Like I said, it should be still up. It's on a random YouTube channel. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. I'm sure it's gotten a few more hits over the last couple of days. Yeah, I have found... So what he supposedly said, Ham Roberts, the divisional commander of 2nd Div at the time, said was this was going to be a piece of cake, apparently, to a few senior officers in the planning. There's no proof of that at all. None. Also, so with that said, again, this is never proved, is apparently around the anniversary or on the anniversary of the raid every year, people, whoever they may be, veterans, we don't know. Again, it's hard to prove, right? Is they would send him pieces of cake in the mail because of what happened. And I mean, it's just not that sent him to leave the country. I mean, he was just ridiculed to no end forever. He just left. And I can't say I blame him, because it wasn't his fault in that sense. Yeah, he made some tactical decisions that were not right, but Commander hasn't done that. Okay. Scott. Brad, why do you think the Dieppe raid was approved? Isn't that the $1 million question right there? I'm not saying that the Enigma part's not a reason for approval. I'm just saying it doesn't add up because something's missing, and because of the whole iteration. Because O'Keefe talks about this too, but that's his argument, right? The pinch part is pulled out of all of this, Rudder 1 and 2, and then eventually with Jubilee. All tax on Dieppe, different formats, but this part's always there. That's great. It's just there's no document that says that. It's hard to tell because it's so muddled. There's so much going on. There's so many moving pieces. There's so many different parts. It becomes so confusing and so much noise after the fact. Documents not being fully accessible still even to this day. I don't know. And I don't want to say 100%. I'm a historian. I've been spending, I don't know, countless hours in archives. I've lost track. I don't like going down that path without the proper evidence. For myself, because, right, I have a somewhat professional, in air quotes, because I'm not a professional historian in the academic sense. But I have something to uphold. I have a thought process to uphold, somewhat of a reputation to uphold. I don't want to go like, this is why, based on a lack of evidence, whatever it may be. I think it was Graham Broad once said, if you're going to say the Pope is Catholic, I still need a footnote. I still need a source. That to me speaks volumes, right? We still need it. We just need it, right? We know what it's not because there's no evidence of it, right? We dismiss those because there's no evidence. There is pieces of evidence here, right, for the pinch, which is great, which is the way it should be, right? I'm not always saying you need a smoking gun because it might not exist. What I'm saying is it the pinch raid? Yeah, possibly. Is it 100% confirmed? No. And again, it's so muddled. It's hard to rip apart, right? Literally, I've done this. I went through the documents because O'Keefe talks about that, I think, especially in the new edition of Monday in August, about they're just random files. I think it is. It's under general, literally labeled just general file connected to Dieppe. And there's all this stuff about commandos and what's going on and planning and ops. And it's just confusing to rip apart and put together again. It's just so many stumbling blocks, documents in 2 different countries, which is a pain when it comes to Canada and the Second World War, because you're not going to understand these things without British sources. It's so hard to put together, and that's what O'Keefe has done. He's put it together. It's just we're missing that kind of thing that brings it all together 100%, being like, this is it, right? I mean, they were raiding to raid. They were raiding to learn. They were not raiding to learn for Normandy, but they were raiding to learn to raid in a lot of cases. St. Nazar and all of that has Enigma. All of that. Enigma makes a good story in a lot of ways. Even at the time, it makes a good story. It gets people to get convinced to do these things, to throw resources that might not be fully available or used in a better capacity to do this thing. Well, we'll bring down the U-boat threat. Okay, cool. That's great. But I don't know. It's missing. That's all I'm saying. It's just missing. So to say 100%, I think it is possibly the pinch, but I think there are reasons to get it going. And then again, to say, well, which one, right? Why is, Rudder's canceled, Rudder 2 was canceled, all because of overflight of German aircraft, right? That's why it's originally canceled. And then there's the spotting on the coast. They couldn't call it off because it was too late by the time they get in range for Jubilee. All this stuff. Why is it still going, right? Is it the Enigma that it's so important to throw a whole division at shore because of that? You can argue about that after. Maybe I'll give my opinion on that in a bit. But it's missing that piece. So again, it's so muddled, and I don't have the time to do this. Wish I did. I don't think I'm ever going to have time to do this, but I'd love to do that. It's just literally go back down to the nuts and bolts. Like I did that with Hong Kong, right? And that was a dissertation, and it took forever. It took years. Someone would have to do this again, like I did for Hong Kong. You have to rip it down to its studs. You can't start with anything. You have to start from the archives and just go put it together yourself. That's it, because there's so much going on here. You have to rip it apart. You have to timeline this. You've got to go and see the documents. You got to go to 2 different countries to see the documents. It's just so much needs to be done here. That's just my opinion, and I know that's not a satisfying answer, but I don't think there's this one thing, right? Because Normandy is liberate Europe. Dieppe, as Dave said, is a raid, not an invasion. Raids have to have different, things driving the engine. So that's why, the pinch makes sense, right? It makes sense. But again, we can argue about costs later. Okay. Were Piats used? No. There was no German armor, so they weren't needed. I don't think they were even in service yet, if I'm remembering correctly. But no, they were not used. Yeah, Scott's an archivist. So, oh yeah, right, because he's going on a trip. Yeah, conference. Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of your bread and butter, right? Hey, Marks and Sparks, thanks for coming on. Ooh, corporate archivist. Aren't you fancy? Norman loves to get into Market Garden dig in, eh? Good on you. Yeah, that's a good point, Keith. There's always unknowables, right? Anything can happen. Anything can happen. Plane can get shot down with all the senior leaders on it. Ship could go down. Ship could block the shore. Tank could block the only exit. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. That's the thing. That was the problem I would say with Dieppe. Too many moving parts. Like I explained, maybe you just jumped on. I don't know, Keith, but if F is reliant on A going perfectly, like that's not going to go well if anything in the middle also falls apart, right? It's just there's too much. It's just too much. And I don't want to say this outright because I don't have any evidence for it. So this is a spitballing idea. I'm not stuck in my ways. I'm not setting in stone. But again, and because I was reading O'Keefe's newest edition last night, if that is his argument, right, for the tanks coming in, why he sends the Fusiliers de Montreal as the floating reserve into that side with the commandos and everything, why Roberts does all of that is the pinch. That's great. And I get it. and I get trying to take the flank and get it in headland because that's what they were supposed to do on the other side, but it didn't happen. But it seems like it's just under resourced. If that's the main driver, what is going on here? Like it's not enough. They weren't throwing enough at this. It was just so poorly planned. If that's the case, if that's the driver, then it's just a horrible plan that should never have been put into place, regardless of what it was. It's just it's too much. It's just too much. Yeah, they're supposed to get through the town. I can't remember which unit off the top of my head, and take an airfield outside of town and put up a perimeter and counterattacks, because it was supposed to be a longer operation than it obviously went, because it only went for the morning, right? They're supposed to hold any reinforcements back on the outside, take that airfield out, which again is heavily criticized, rightfully so, as being an objective, that kind of thing. So it's supposed to be, I'm not sure the exact distance off the top of my head. It's not close. It's quite far, particularly for infantry under these circumstances. Again, this isn't Normandy with how many divisions being thrown to the coast at once and the great invasion of Western Europe. It's just not the same. Too many factors involved, but that was the plan. Again, I've seen documents of the different elements, right? The different plans, plans for Rudder 1 and 2, all of that. There was literally a map when they're in the planning stages. Sorry, I keep talking with my hands. They were I wish I had time to grab it. It's on my old computer, which is dying, and I can't get stuff off it fast. So there's a line outside the town saying, we take this line, right? Hold it, do your whatever it is your objectives are, because there's more than just a pinch objective going on down there. Fall back. We bomb that line. You hold on. You fall back again into the town. We bomb that line again. We fall back to the boats. We bomb the town into oblivion. That was the plan. So that is what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to get out there and hold them off, because they're supposed to be there for 12 hours, roughly, because of tides and all those factors that come up with amphibious landings. And it just doesn't happen, right? So that was the idea, is units push through, the tanks push through, get outside, hold them off with whatever is coming. I mean, it seems like there was poor intelligence planning to know what units were in the area and not, but that's neither here nor there at this particular juncture. But yeah, there's an objective. Yeah, that map, I mean, because I got shown that map. I know the one you're talking about, where they're saying, well, this is what was supposed to happen. They're supposed to go here. Because Alex showed it to me before it was released with the exhibit, before they were finishing up, before it went to the printers way back in whenever that was, January, February. And we talked about this at length, about what should be on the map, how it should be presented on the map. I said it's got to be clear that these are the objectives. These aren't the reality. These are the objectives. Well, just real quick. Thanks for coming out, Scott. I really appreciate you jumping on, watching in the airport. That's really, really appreciative before you're, going out for work and a vacay. So thank you. And thank you for all your support for the channel. Can't say enough about how great you've been. So back to that. So yeah, so I saw that. Oh, maybe I hit the wrong one. Here we go. Yeah, I saw that map while it was still in its final stages of development. We had a meeting. I had a meeting with a couple people from the JVC about it, and yeah, it's a great map. I wish they would sell it as a poster online, especially so us Canadians can get it, because I think it's so well done. But yeah, that's the point. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, right? There's these objectives that just never even come close to being done. I mean, I'm not saying tanks didn't get through. They did. There's a huge myth about Dieppe that the tanks never made it off the Shawl, or the Chert, as it's called in France. Oh, I have some of them somewhere. Actually, now that we're talking about it, this is pieces from the beach. This is one. I had another one somewhere. I grabbed a whole bunch. Oh, here it is. So this is another one. This one's a bit bigger. So this is the stuff that supposedly stopped tanks. Didn't only stop the few. Plus fire. Some got hit by mortars. Yeah, so that's a great question about having, what are the objectives, what was supposed to happen. So yeah, I don't know the distance offhand off the top of my head. I'm sure it's in the maps, in the official history especially, because those maps are excellent. And Project 44 can kind of give you, oh no, they don't do Dieppe, never mind. Oh, actually, yeah, I don't know if they've done the actual objectives. I don't think so. But you can get a better look at it with their map, which I'll link as well down below after. lots going on there. Might be a bit after, but because I got to run at a certain point. But depending on how long we keep on keeping on, you know. But yeah, so that's that. That was the plan, especially with the air power that's put on for rudder. That's canceled for all kinds of reasons, right? Arthur Harris, commander in Bomber Command, fought tooth and nail to get them out. Not have Bomber Command involved because he thought resources are better elsewhere with the strategic bombing. So that's always going on with Harris. He does that for everything. Never stopped. So it was just another version of that. Yeah, I mean, well, Brooke is at the top. He would have known better than anybody. He would have known the best in the position of command that he was in. Saying it's vital. I mean, that's the thing, right? And that's just at the time. And I think we have to understand. And I've been thinking about this a lot, especially lately with Dieppe, the anniversary, and how it connects the Enigma, obviously, and O'Keefe's work and everything to do with the Battle of the Atlantic. Work has been done by some great historians looking at this and the losses that are taken by the Allies at this point in the war. Yeah, there's the blind, they call, the Enigma. Bletchley Park is blind. They don't have the code. They're cracked for the four-rotor Enigma, sorry. They're blind in that sense. As it turns out, they capture documents, was this 10 weeks later after Dieppe, off a ship off the coast of Suez, I think. Port Said, I believe. Anywhere off the coast of Egypt. Making all this superfluous, which is just another thing that gets forgotten. I'm sure for all kinds of reasons. But with that said, the losses weren't as bad as they thought they were. Of course, at the time, they don't know that. They don't know it's not going to get worse. Things get better, obviously, because the Enigma comes back, big Enigma cracking comes back online. But it was never as bad as they thought. Of course, Churchill thought it was going to end the war. But Churchill was known to fly between extremes. He could be, upright, happy-go-lucky in Churchillian style, and optimistic to the T's, aka Gallipoli, and then down and morose because he suffered from depression as well about anything fighter numbers, North Atlantic, all that stuff. He was known to be having fits of that, right? And his opinions on the war obviously shaped the post-war understanding. His series on it, where is it? Down there, I have his old volumes of his writing of the war. He's talking about that in there, about how it's all it was going to end if we didn't get this under control. It's just the numbers don't support that. Yeah, it was bad. I'm not saying it's good, but it was bad. But it wasn't war ending by any means. Supplies were still getting through. Some convoys never saw a U-boat. Some guys who served for years never got attacked. It's just, I think we have this popular opinion or mind's eyes, I like to say, about how the North Atlantic went, and somehow everybody was always under threat. And that's just not true, particularly later on, but also when it was at its worst. Yeah, they were getting sunk, but not everyone was getting sunk. Not every boat was going down. That's just not true. Like the convoys that were that bad were a rarity. So I think that's something to be kept in mind here in terms of that, because context matters. Just because a historical actor thinks something, obviously, it doesn't mean it's true, right? So I deal with this all the time. Just because they think it doesn't mean it's the actuality. Now, it matters because that's what they think. Because of what they think, that's how they act. That's how you go about it, right? That's how you do the history. Why does Churchill do that? Because this is what he thinks. Doesn't mean it's real, but that's what he's thinking. So I think that's just something to really keep in mind with Dieppe and all of that. It's just something I don't hear discussed often, and I think it's part of the conversation that needs to be had. Were the numbers as bad? No, they're just not. It's not the case. The U-boats couldn't cover all of that space. They had learned techniques. Things were getting better. Technology's getting better. Again, it's not great at 42. I know that. And there's problems. There's bigger problems coming, right? That are beyond scope of today. But I think it's not what it seems, right? For those of you who have seen Das Buch, actually Wolfgang Petersen, who just passed away, I think the other day. Sometimes I'm behind on my news. Anyway, so I just think a scene in there, right, where there's the two. They could almost not collide, but they're next to each other. And the captain's freaking out, being like, why are we doing this? Why are we near each other? We have so few of us. What are we doing? He's just losing his mind. So I think that speaks a lot about this, because that's accurate. There's just not enough U-boats to cover all that. So to say that this is like the war is ending, we need this Enigma, is just, that's it. That's it, really. I just want to keep that in mind. That's something I think is a nuance that's missing. There's just been so many things added to the historiography that need to be taken into the scope as well. So it's not just Enigma. There's more to it than that. Yeah. Yeah, so here's the documentary. Again, I'll link it after. I can just look that up. It's amazing. I watched it a couple of times. Close Up. Yeah, Close Up. The show is Close Up. It was a CBC show back in the day. So it'll come back to me now, because I think I researched it around this time last year. But yeah, there's two parts to it. So make sure I'll find a link that has both, or has pieced them together. The one I watched was definitely 2 parts. It's fascinating, and just to see the figures that you don't normally see, especially nowadays, because obviously they're past and these things aren't on TV, and documentaries don't use them because it's all animations and other stuff I'm not going to get into. But it's fascinating. Okay, according to the plan, were the tanks to be sacrificed part of covering retreat? No, they were not. They were going to, re-embark them, put them on the landing craft, get back. It was never the plan. They're supposed to get through, do the stuff, and come back, which again is another moving part that obviously didn't happen. Because not enough of them they didn't get close to their objectives anyway. Not that they were stuck on the rocks, but they didn't get to their objective. Yeah, 100% the plan. That's what I mean. I was talking earlier about that. There's these bombing lines, and it's like, well, you pull back now, we'll bomb. Pull back now, and bomb. Like, that's what's supposed to be covering the retreat, right? It's just pummeling the positions, so they can just pull back in the chaos in the German lines. Of course, that never happens, because they canceled that part of the raid, right? That doesn't go ahead. Ooh, museum ships. That'll be fun. Let us know, Scott. Yeah, and if they'd seize the town like they wanted to, right? That was the idea. The infantry holds, tanks get out, then they fall back. And of course, it never gets there. Oh, see you, Norman. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Yeah, Hughes Hallett is there, which is, to me, is amazing. Because you don't see him in much. He doesn't get talked about very much, which O'Keefe does, which is great. I think that's so important here, because he's never mentioned, really, especially in Canadian sources. It's always Monty or Mountbatten. We're trying to find a villain, which I've talked about. Maybe I can talk about a little bit. But yeah. I think I've caught up. If I missed a question, please repost it, and I will get to you. I think I've hit them all. Questions, anyway. Any questions? Fire away. Fire away. Yes, here it is. Yeah, so this is what I... see you, Scott. Thanks for coming on. Enjoy your flight. Have a safe one. Enjoy your vacation / conference. Catch you on the next one. Yeah, so this is the plan. Link up with the Camerons, take the airfield, get back. All in a one-tide cycle. It's crazy. That was never going to happen. Even under the best circumstances, that's just not going to happen. So yeah, so it's crazy. Yeah, again, so if you have questions, please fire away. Yeah, so this is good. Lots of good questions, lots of good insights. I appreciate it. War Waffle, yeah, I think that's from We Have Ways. Came up with that one. I'm sure there's some sort of shirt or something somewhere. Man, my office gets toasty in the summertime, even with the air down to nothing. Air conditioning, air con to the Brits. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think I'm missing anything. So there's a bunch of books down below that I think are important for the Canadian perspective. Um, uh, Keith Burke's are vital. Tim Cook's Necessary War gives it in context, which is important. And then The Fight for History, his books. His book puts it into real good context afterwards and understanding what part Dieppe plays in our understanding of the war, how we understand Dieppe, and all that. It's a great book. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Okay, Keith is asking about how many rounds of the tanks carry to do all this covering. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I don't know the technical specs of the Churchill well at all. I don't do that kind of tech stuff because it's easy to find on the internet. Sorry. Yeah, it's not. It probably wouldn't have been enough, especially if they had faced any kind of resistance. But I don't know like the exact number. But everything with Dieppe, it just wasn't enough. I can tell you right now without even knowing the number, but knowing how much is limited space, and how much rounds these things can, roughly carry, it wouldn't have been enough. Yeah. So, sorry, just one second here. A little tangential, but what do you know about Howard Hughes' role in the portable? I have no idea. Sorry. Yeah, I know Morgan looks at this at Cossack. Possibly. I mean, that guy was all over the place with the ideas. I know it's not connected to Dieppe in any way. Maybe because of Dieppe. I don't know, but I don't know. Like I was just saying, Hughes Hallett is not talked about. I've never seen any papers of his or connected to him. No, sorry, I don't know. But it makes sense that these guys are thinking about it. But he was thinking about all kinds of crazy stuff, right? O'Keefe does a great job talking about that and all the different stuff and his connections to Mountbatten and all that stuff. That I don't know. I don't know. Sorry. I wish I did. Yeah. So yeah, talk about the books. I've got a whole bunch of them here. Show them off. I have O'Keefe's original, the original one Day in August, which did a huge number on the historiography in this country in a good way. Of course, it's still debated. Tim Cook doesn't believe him. I'll just say that outright. In his book, he doesn't believe O'Keefe. He just doesn't. He told me he doesn't believe him. That's fine. No one's ever going to believe the same thing all the time, everywhere. It's just not true. It's impossible. So that's that. So Villa's book, if you can find it secondhand, buy it that way from a little bookstore or something, independent one. I would suggest it. And then, of course, it's mentioned in the heavy guy, 6 Years of War. Right. This is about training. I mean, these books are available online. You can get them in PDFs. The official histories of Canadian Army in the Second World War, not the other services, which has been frustrating me lately, but Canadian Army is all there. Same with Korea and First World War. So that's awesome. So it's talked about in there. Obviously, Stacy is missing this huge chunk with the Enigma Ultra because he couldn't talk about it, nor was he privy to any of that stuff. I think he knew, but he didn't have access. I do remember Stacy in his autobiography talking about Dieppe extensively. He was on it from the beginning. As soon as he heard about it, he was collecting documents, getting interviews, what had happened. It's missing this key piece about Enigma, but so is his entire official history is missing it. It's all completely missing because it wasn't secret yet. So it's all missing. Some of it adds, huge chunks are missing, others not so much, but it's missing. So he did it the best he could under the circumstances, I will say. Others not so much. There's some other ones he didn't do as good. I know, going against Stacy is seen as a cardinal sin to some people in Canadian military history, but that's what I do. So I've been asked by others, because I haven't had a question in a while, was it worth it? Was Dieppe worth it? I think you might be able to guess my answer based on everything I've said so far, or if you've been with us the whole time. And this might be controversial, but I was asked by Amanda, who's been on the channel. It's great. Who talked about her great uncle who served in Normandy. She asked me last night because she couldn't make it. Is it worth it? My opinion, no, it was not worth it. Again, these things have to be taken in context, yes. But I was asked the question, would I frame a book around that question? No, I would not. But I was asked, and I said I would answer them. No, we know with hindsight, I don't think it was worth it. The Battle of the Atlantic was not as bad as it was said to be. It just wasn't. The numbers didn't hold up to the panic that had developed in the minds of the Allied leaders at the time. It just wasn't. So to launch a whole division plus at a protected port for one objective that might work, just, it's too much. All these moving parts, even if you just strip it down to the Enigma part, it was too much. There was so much reliant upon that the Germans would not just instantly destroy everything as soon as the first shell is fired, which is what they did. The commandos couldn't get in anyway. It's too much. It's too much, too many resources put into a plan that was never going to work. Dieppe was not worth it in that sense. The Battle of the Atlantic was not as bad as they thought it was. I get it in context. That's why they make the decisions they do. I get that. I know that. I'm an academically trained historian who I think I know a little bit about what I'm doing at this point. I think a little bit. I know I have lessons to still learn. But when asked that question, I said I would answer it in this form, which is not academic. No, it was not worth it. When we know what we know. They threw a whole division at it with too many moving parts, whether you think it's about the Enigma or not. No, I don't think throwing a whole division plus all these specially trained commandos, which the one worked, the one didn't as much, with high casualties, it's not worth it. Could it have ended the war sooner? No, I don't think it would have, right? That's the conclusion that's reached in the official history about Enigma, cracking Enigma and Ultra. It ended the war, what is it, 2 years, supposedly, earlier? No, that's impossible to prove. You can't prove these things. But as we know, World War II was a war of attrition. We like to think World War I is a war of attrition. World War II was as well, right? It's a war of attrition. It was about causing your enemy to get who can outlast. And that's what it was. Saying that these are magic bullets that would end the war faster is just not how these things go. The Soviets have millions of soldiers on the Eastern Front. The Germans have millions as well. One little machine crack isn't going to solve every problem. It's not going to give you insight into everything. Not every unit's going to have Enigma. It's not going to save every life. It just doesn't work that way. It makes for a good story. It just doesn't fit how this war was fought and how it was going to go in terms of what we know and how the people were thinking and all the documents and all the planning that we all have accessible now. Are we missing a bunch? Yeah, we are. But it is what it is. That's my opinion. I don't think it's worth it. Please disagree with me. Comments, especially down below. Please do. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think. Please tell me after, especially so that it's saved for perpetuity and an easier way to access. I would love to hear your opinions, but my thought is everything I've read, all the stories, everything that happened afterwards, the impact, and you can strip it all down to, I would say, how it affected Canadian thinking. It wasn't worth it, right? We became timid in a lot of ways. We were trying to do this in different ways. We got worried about splitting our troops up and didn't want different divisions going different places, which ended up happening anyway. But not because of Dieppe. There's this trepidation about under British command. You have Hong Kong and Dieppe within 8 months of each other, ish. It's just a mess, and it was not worth it. Throwing a whole division at a limited objective to me is just crazy. It's just nuts, and it didn't work. So I mean, that's hindsight. Spoiler alert, hindsight. But it just wasn't worth it. And that you can just strip out even the human element of that. I still don't think it's worth it. It's used loss of resources that you didn't put enough into it. You either go all the way or you don't do it. That's my opinion. Okay, with the DM post-mortem, did not the link staff between engineer and tanks prop Allied planners develop DD? I don't know specifically, and I've looked at the DD extensively. I know the AVRE is connected in a way. I mean, it's not, as I was talking about this at the beginning, it's not as ubiquitous as we want it to be. The Canadian engineers who landed at Juneau are out in the open, just like the infantry, which is whatever it is. But the DD, I don't know. I don't know the story as well, like down to that, archival level about, the funnies and Hobart's funnies and all of that. I want to say no, I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if Hobart's talking about that. The staff is talking about that. I can't say for sure. But I know the DDs are a discussion before Dieppe, right? Because there's always this there's discussion of amphibious landings throughout the interwar period and how to go about doing it, right? Gallipoli did a number on the psyche of the British Army and Navy and the British people. It was discussed at length about what to do about the amphibious landing because they knew it was going to have to happen again if they ever went to war on that scale again. They knew it was going to have to happen. And there's raids at Zeeburg and Ostend as well. Lessons are learned there. High casualties there too. These are raids in the First World War and invasions. Gallipoli fails, obviously. Zeeburg and Ostend are successful within their limited objectives. But anyway, with that said, they're discussing these things about what's the best way to do this. You have development of landing craft, which is a big one, right? That's well before any of this. The DDs, I don't know. I wish I knew more in depth, but I knew things are being discussed in the 30s, in the 20s about what to do with these things, right? How to get these equipment on shore, how to protect infantry, all of that. But at the DD specifically, I don't know, but I know it's connected to the Hobart funny story and everything that goes on with that division, with the 79th and all of that. And again, with the Americans coming on board with the DDs and the funnies as well. It's a complicated story that I'm just not an expert in. Sorry, I apologize. But I don't know that one for sure. But it is a great story to dig into, I think, because these connections are so interesting. Yeah, they're great. Yeah, the Canadians and Britain, France for the World War II fix. That's what we're trying to do, trying to change it up, mix it up. Get in there and stir the pot, the American pot, get some new ideas in there. It's great. And thanks again, Susan. You're great support as well. I really, really appreciate everything you've done for me. Okay, yeah, 80 rounds. That makes sense. Still wouldn't have been enough. Plus, they're limited. 2-pounder, 6-pounder, not very much. Plus, lacking in high explosives, I would imagine. Not all 80 of them would have been high explosive. But again, depending on what your attack was. But again, they weren't really planning that much, so unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, if it's not about Enigma, it's really an almost unforgivable mistake. If it is indeed about Enigma, then the mistake is only 100% clear in retrospect, even though looking ahead at the time, it's iffy. Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Gary. And that's how I think about this. Because obviously, again, I was talking earlier, I don't know if you were on at that point, but about O'Keefe's theories and ideas and everything. I'm not against them. I'm not here to rip them apart. I'm just saying there's the missing link. Not to use that terminology because I don't like it, but it's just there's that leap that needs to be made. Let's talk about that. So you maybe go back. But that said, even if that is the case, is this still something that should have gone ahead? With hindsight, it's hard to move past that. At the time, maybe it's worth it, right? We've got this, we don't know. They didn't have the 4-rotor cracked, Enigma cracked. They couldn't track it like they did with the 3. They were blind. Issues of convoy protection are still rudimentary almost at this point. Things like sonar and ASDIC, as it's called in the Commonwealth, and air's cover, long-range cover is still lacking. I get that. So having Enigma in your back pocket, it's huge. So to say what to be done it's hard, right? That's what I'm saying. I was saying this earlier. I think Susan asked me about all the controversies, and that's one of them, right? Like, why do it? For years, we had no reason to do this. It doesn't make any sense. A butcher and bolt rate's all great, but what cost? This is the worst case scenario. And it happens, right? Is it worth it? If it's just a butcher and bolt rate, no, of course not. I mean, this is not how you train a division. An afternoon, or they wanted it to be 12 hours. Still not a great idea. There's people who are talking about this all over social media about it being a morale booster. There's no evidence of that. About it to appease the Soviet Union. There's also no evidence of that. Would have Joseph Stalin said this is good enough? Of course not. Are you kidding me? He was never happy. Nothing was ever enough. He wouldn't have been happy if they were right there with them the whole time. Well, they didn't. They wanted to be, and they said no. So they wanted to have troops there, and they said no. So to say that this is because of Stalin is nonsensical. It also doesn't bear to evidence. Stalin didn't give a crap about what the Allies were doing. It was never enough. So that's also a controversy right there. We're trying to appease the Soviets. We're trying to appease the Americans. Also not true. There's no evidence of that. About appeasing the Americans by launching a one-day raid. That's not what they were asking for. That's not what they wanted. Also, anything more was impossible without being even a bigger slaughter. So that's controversy there. God, there's so many. Should have been launched again after being discovered the first time. People have said no. That's where the unauthorized action about Mountbatten with Brian Villa's work comes in, because Mountbatten apparently just did it without it being reapproved, even though that's not the case. I've seen the documents where the permission was given carte blanche almost basically by McNaughton saying, good go. You're good to go. They're under your command. You're good. I literally saw the document signed by McNaughton at the time, who's in command. Which is also something that's not talked about, which is weird. I thought that was interesting because he's given permission by the Canadian government to do so, and he did. There was a blanket. Yeah, so that's really weird. For years, it was supposed Germans had advanced knowledge of Dieppe. Yeah, we know they did not. They did not. Not like it mattered. But who promoted that myth? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Mountbatten's the source of a lot of these myths, a lot of these misunderstandings. There's that. There's those who want the Germans to seem better at all costs, almost, which is part of this as well. But also people promote these things, and this is I was going to say, but I guess this is a good time to start doing it, is, again, not attacking O'Keefe in that sense. And I've talked about this before. This is not new. In Canada, we have this thing I call fascination with defeat, but also we make so many excuses. Anything goes wrong. It's never our fault. Sometimes things just go wrong. They just go wrong. Sometimes things happen, they're just scheduled, and they just go wrong. And we always try to find a reason why it went wrong. It's always somebody else's fault. It's never our fault. Or we pick a scapegoat, Kriar, more than once. And we ostracize that person. They're, person non grata, public enemy number one in the history space. Kriar's filled that role. Simmons has filled that role. Monty's filled that role more than once. Harris, Hong Kong as well, Maltby. We're always looking for somebody to blame. And I think this is part of it. And someone, I think, said this, I can't remember where. Maybe it was on a comment on YouTube on the video from yesterday. Said exactly the same thing. We are always trying to find a reason why something happened, why it went, why we did it. Dieppe has to have this noble purpose. And again, and O'Keefe makes a good argument, I say. I mean, it's just missing that one piece, like I keep reiterating, because in case someone watches this now, comes on board, like Scott, or watches it later and it's like, you didn't say that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, I did. But that said, I mean, I think that just leads to bigger questions, right? Why we do this, why we keep focusing on defeat. I mentioned this yesterday, talking to Nathan from Project 44. This anniversary lines up with St. Lambert's-Ardève. Right? One's bigger than the other. I get that. Don't jump on me because of pure numbers. That doesn't make any, that's not an argument. One is a massive victory for the Allies. One is a Canadian victory. Canadian tenacity, Canadian everything. Smarts, learning in battle. Currie is a humble man for his entire life, despite his accomplishments. I mean, what a guy. He died 2 years before I was even born, so I never even got close to a chance of meeting this man. One of my, I don't have any personal heroes, but he's one of them for everything he did. And I mean afterwards as well. I mean, just a humble man. We don't talk about him in that sense. It gets talked about a little bit, but why aren't we talking about St. Lambert's-Ardève at the same time? We're like, yeah, we got slaughtered. We hate the Brits. They used us as all this stuff. And I'm like, well, we could be talking about what Currie did for 3 days and plugging the gap. leading that with 1 hour of sleep over 3 days, doing recce's on the ground by himself. He did that at the beginning of Total Isis too. He jumps out of his tank, jumps the head out in the open by himself. He did that twice. He did it at St. Lambert sur Dive as well. He's staying up. He's moving between foxholes. He's moving between tanks. He's giving orders. He knows they're going to get men killed. And he's doing it with coolness, calmness, taking that risk, taking the responsibility, giving praise to those who deserve it. And yet we don't talk about this as much as nearly as we should. We have this great story that is not told, yet we have every intricacy of Dieppe discussed to death, where we failed. We have to pick apart the reasons why we fail. I'm not saying we shouldn't do the history work. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we do ceremonies, we do talking about Dieppe and the loss and all of that. And the battle for St. Lambert sur Dive is also 1 day away of the end. It'll be tomorrow, and you'll hear nothing. Absolutely nothing. The media won't talk about it, especially now because it's not an important year for Normandy. It won't be discussed. But Dieppe, it's discussed every year the same way, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until it's been 80 years. But what happened in Normandy is D-Day and then a fight about a few other things and then just disappears. That drives me bonkers because we should be talking about both, but we don't. And it just drives me crazy. Curry, the men of the Argylls, the South Alberta, the guys that came in relief, the anti-tank guns that joined them for a couple hours. Like, this story is a movie waiting for a budget. Like, you don't need to make anything up. And you've got a gripping thriller war movie. I always say this is what St. Lambert sur Dive is what Fury should have been, except we got that piece of crap. When we could have had just, you used the historical accurate parts that are no different from what you did, but make it a real good story. And it's a hell of a lot more gripping story than whatever that piece of crap was, and we just don't do it. Canadians, we just sit by meekly and be like, okay, well, they should make a movie about us, or we just do it ourselves for once. But no, we sit back and say, we got slaughtered in the trenches. We got slaughtered at Dieppe. We weren't listened to, or we got tricked, or this and that. And it's just, it's something I'm talking about immensely, and that's why I don't want to talk about it too much now. But it drives me bonkers. And I think we should do both, and we do not. Anyway, back to a few more questions because I'm going to have to start the wrap up fairly shortly, but I can still take more questions. Are there any official records of meetings? Not that I know of. I'm not aware of any. Like, there's not, nothing that I've ever read. I mean, I keep coming back to my own work. There's meetings about Hong Kong that we don't know any details about. That I don't think documents even exist. If they do, they were destroyed. I've never read about that about Dieppe. I don't think so. O'Keefe has talked about a new, almost an O group, almost in a way, but beforehand, of the different units coming together that were the pinch part, and that. So that's about it, unfortunately. Yeah, well, Scott, you're right, and Dave kept bringing that up. Sheldrake, who knows Dave, who's now a supporter, YouTube team member. Thanks a lot again, Dave. Your support again. I mean, I've told you how much your impact my life has, your impact on my life is, and all that. But your support is so amazing to have. It makes me feel good all the time. So thank you. Same with you, Scott. You are a great supporter. Anyway, yeah. So it's the same idea, right? It's the last of the big raids. It's not a practice warlord, and that's the way it should be seen, right? It should be seen as raid, and you're right. That video has 4 parts, which makes sense. The one I think I can find again has them all together, so you don't have to worry about that. So check out for that link after. I'll do it when I get back. I just got to go run around and then I'll come back. Vokes is a scapegoat. Oh God, yeah. I've done it myself. I need to stop, but yeah, you're right. And yeah, the whole Kurt Meyer thing. Yeah, all that stuff. So thanks. Hey Pete, thanks for coming on. I know you're a bit late, but better late than never, right, bud? Thanks anyway. Yeah. So Gary, good comment. This is a discussion, great lesson on why we need to bring at least a little skepticism when we hear these past narratives that attempt to explain away. Yeah, I mean, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying disbelieve, don't be cynical about everything, but just some critical thinking skills, hey, hold on. Or does someone have something to gain by presenting it this way, right? Does Mountbatten have to protect his reputation afterwards and then still go on to higher military positions afterwards? Maybe, because that's exactly what happened. Right? He should have never held these commands. He gets higher later on because he's fighting to defend his reputation. You got to think about these things. You can't just be like, well, that's what's written down, that must be true. Because I see this all the time. People will just believe certain groups no matter what. Like they'll believe veterans no matter what they've written. Doesn't mean it could be like a unicorn appeared over Juno Beach, and they'll be like, that's what happened, right? Or Mountbatten said this, so therefore it's true. Like that's just not how this game works, guys. And you're right, Gary. Skepticism is a good thing. Thinking about this is a good thing. All of that is good. It's all good, and that's what I'm trying to get. If that's the takeaway from today, it's hold on a minute, take a beat, think about it. That's all I'm asking. I just don't want any of these books. I don't care. Tim Cook, C.P. Stacy, David O'Keefe, even Dennis Whitaker. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his first name wrong. Denny Whitaker, as according to Dave. Terrence Robertson, especially a journalist who wrote later on. Brian Villa, any of them. Take that, grain of salt. Take that critical eye. I'm not saying be, jaded. I'm saying just think about it for a second. I'm trying to share that education I had, right, with some who don't have that opportunity and aren't that lucky. I mean, I'm so blessed to have had that happen to me. I mean, I did work to get there, but I also had a lot of things go right for me. So I want to share what I've learned, and that's one of them. Just hold on a minute, and this is why I buy different books. This is why, this is an example. I just got English's book about Normandy and Carlo D'Este's book about Normandy to compare and contrast. That's it. Rabbit Razorback, I have to watch later. Yeah, thanks for coming out. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I appreciate it. Experience at Dieppe influenced connections in Normandy, Italy? Not really. No, I say no. Kind of. Sort of, but not really. Because, well, just all kinds of factors. A good chunk of them who fought there were killed or taken as POWs. A few made it back, but a few were wounded, so they missed out on a good chunk of the campaign anyway. Like most of those second div guys who came into Dieppe in September 44 of that triumphant march were not there on the day. So a little bit, but not really. I talked way at the beginning, so I have to go back. But things like engineering vehicles and that kind of thing. I mean, that's a very minor point. But there is a little bit there, but hardly anything. It's just not the same. It's like with Hong Kong, right? That whole force was 100% casualties technically, right? Because casualties is POWs. You can't learn lessons if there's nobody there. Dieppe is a very small chunk. And a lot of that learning was lost anyway, because, and I was O'Keefe's book, all of them lost, all the regiments anyway, or battalions lost their commanders. So, hold on, here is it. I didn't write it down. But anyway, only one had a commanding officer come back. So, yeah, so thank you. Hey, Lorelei, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. Oh, you mean the Royal Engineers? Yeah, they wouldn't have been in the know on that, I don't think. I don't see that as being something they would have even been told even remotely close to that, because they wouldn't have needed to know. But there is evidence now of this stuff. I mean, like I said, there's leaps and stuff like that, Jaron, that O'Keefe makes in his book. I mean, they're tiny, tiny leaps, but they're still a leap. Again, I've talked about this before. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, I just woke up. Yeah, I know your schedule is not great for these kinds of things, but glad you could join us now. You can always go back, watch after as well, and leave comments, questions down below as well. I can try to answer them after through the comments section down below. Yeah, I mean, there's evidence now, so I'm not sure what they mean exactly. They haven't got any evidence of it being a pinch raid. Not at the time, no. There'd be no evidence of that, especially down to that level. No. So Laura, rubbing it in about her great California farmers market. I guess we have that now too, but it's not going to last much longer in my neck of the woods. A McNaughton question. Stupendous. If Dieppe succeeded, do you think McNaughton would have had a stronger card to hold regards retaining control of Canadian forces, which he ultimately clashed with Monty and ousted for Criar? No, not even a little bit. Not even close. No, God no. If that were true, right? Criar. It wouldn't have mattered. Criar was gunning for him. Brooke had lost confidence in him because of exercise Spartan. They'd clashed for years anyway. I mean, they were like frenemies in a way. They had clashed over something we don't know exactly on the Western Front because they were on the same staff of the Canadian Corps, the artillery, both gunners. They clashed. We don't know what exactly they did. Dave might know. I don't know if we know confirmed. No, like that kind of thing. They had clashed, but they had lunches with each other for years because of McNaughton's role within the Canadian Army in the interwar period. They were kind of buddy-buddy, but also kind of spiky with each other in letters and stuff that I've seen. And then Brooks, diary, which I have a copy of. And then I've also seen his papers. I think that is what seals it. And Criar's ambition of getting him out of the way lines up to perfect storm. I don't know. I don't think it would have mattered at all. I don't think Dieppe is even a chip that he could have played in the slightest because I don't think it would have made a difference because Spartan was a whole other thing. And plus McNaughton has almost next to nothing to do with Dieppe, right? He's not involved at all other than giving the approval. He's not involved. It's Criar is involved, right? Criar has to talk his way into being involved. Ham Roberts is obviously involved as the divisional commander. Criar has to talk his way in. And he does, but it wasn't easy. So I don't think it would have made a difference. No one's going to give McNaughton any credit for it. Yeah, and 1940, yeah, which I forgot. Also, because, they ship Canadians over, right, to shore up after Dunkirk. And it goes poorly. Communication issues, logistical issues, which was McNaughton's downfall in Spartan. He couldn't handle logistics. He was a scientist and a soldier, not a planner. He was not a planner. He was a gunner, but he wasn't a planner. He could plan guns, but he couldn't move divisions. And Spartan showed that. Whether they were personally, that's what I'm saying, like him and Brooke were like these frenemy kind of spiky relationship, but then they go for, a nice lunch and a few drinks, I'm assuming, because it's the 1940s. But things like that, right? It doesn't quite work. Anyway, I got to run because I've got to take someone somewhere for 3:00. I've got to take off. But if you have further questions or comments, please leave them down below. Not on the sidebar because I can't interact with that once it's done. Please leave comments, questions down below. We can continue discussion there for an item if you so choose. So thanks for everyone for coming out. I'm glad to have the support for this. I wasn't sure if people were going to actually want to come and watch. That's kind of why I wanted to get the subscriber count up to show that there was some sort of interest. That was it. It was just kind of a test. And you guys passed. Woo! Thank you for doing that. So thank you for coming out, all your great questions, all your insights. Again, if you disagree with me without everything, please tell me. I'm not going to get upset. I get disagreed with all the time. I'm used to it. Go for it. I had my whistling insulted lately, so I think I can handle it. So please do that. If you're not a subscriber, please become one. Real easy, helps me out, as does liking and commenting on all the videos and everything you can. And then just sharing my stuff is a huge help. Getting people on social media who see it is a big element of this, is getting the link shared so new people watch it in different places. That's what helps me get this stuff out there. Also help through Patreon. I know a lot of you already are, and I can't thank you enough. Some of you, like Dave, have just become a YouTube channel member. I think he did it yesterday. Sometimes it doesn't update fully on me in real time, so I don't see that until much later. So thank you. For all that support. So if you can support through that or through Patreon, a few bucks a month. I mean, on Patreon, there's a $1 option. $1 Canadian for some of you, that is nothing. Our dollar is terrible. If you can through that would be so greatly appreciated, so I can keep upgrading tech and getting admissions to museums and stuff, because like the war museum videos have been really popular, and I can't get that without paying to get in for things like that. So thank you so much for all your support and all your help. I can't say that enough. So thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next time. And again, I said yesterday, I forgot to check because I've been busy. I have another one coming up about Canadian war brides. And I'm just so excited for that one because it's a topic I've wanted to talk about on the channel for a long time. And we're going to dig into that one. And there are so many stories and so many personal connections that so many people have in this country that I can't wait to dig into that one with a real expert on it. So stay tuned on details for that. I'll get those out hopefully maybe today or tomorrow. I've got some time this afternoon. So we'll see how things go. So anyway, thanks for coming out today and watching. And I'll get those links up as soon as I get back and get some time to do it. So thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next